Thank you, everybody. Kamsahamnida. And thanks for listening to me yet again. And so this morning at the keynote, I spoke about a lot of the technologies that are available in Firebase. And in this session, I want to drill deeper into one of the technologies and one of my personal favorites, which is called Firebase App Indexing. Now, when I introduced Firebase this morning, I spoke about Firebase as a set of technologies that allow you to develop your application, that allow you to grow your application, and that allow you to earn from your application. Now, Firebase App Indexing is definitely one of these that's built around growing your application. It's for applications that you've built already that you want to re-engage with your users. But let's talk a little bit about how applications work and some of the statistics behind it. First of all, did you know that the average user has 36 applications on their device? And about 3/4 of these applications are rarely used. Most of the time, they're forgotten about. 3/4 of their applications. And of the applications that they use, about 1/3 of them have only been used once. That means you did all the work to get them to install their application. They installed the application, they used it once, and then they forgot all about it. It's terrible. So think about it from you as a developer. What if this is your application? Now, what's the life cycle of building an application? You probably do the research into your markets. You do the research into the content of your app. Maybe you want to build a game. You think about what games and what opportunities are out there for games. Maybe a new sport, or maybe like a new virtual reality game or a new augmented reality game, which is all the rage right now. Now, you've done this research, you've figured out what kind of app, you've figured out how you should build it, you've thought about the technology that you're going to use to build it, you've figured out a plan for how you're going to present it, how you're going to market it, how you're going to sell it. Now you've worked hard to design your application. You want it to be beautiful, you want it to be engaging, you want it to meet the needs of your customers. You've got branding wrapped up in this application, and you want to keep that branding strong. So you've worked hard on design to make sure that people associate your brand with something that's beautiful. You've gotten developers to then start writing the code, and they've spent time writing this code. They've spent time testing it. They've spent time compiling it. They've spent time debugging it. You've then gotten this finished application and taken it out to the market. You've tested it with users. You might have done something like an A/B test where you've figured out what works in your application, what doesn't work in your application. You've done all of this work. You're sitting on top of all of this data about your application, and you know, having done all of this, that your application really is what people want. So you launch it. You've assigned money to market it. You've worked with the press to do PR around it. You've gotten installs. You're looking at your console. You see people downloading it. You see people using it. Everything looks great, and then nothing. Now, how do you avoid this? What if this is you? What if you've done all of this work, and you end up being one of those applications that's only ever used once? You'd really, really want to grow your application. You want to succeed as a business. But it's really hard to do that if people only launch your app once, and then they forget about it. So what can you do? Well, app indexing is one solution to this. The goal of app indexing is to help you to re-engage with your users through a tight integration with Google Search. It works by indexing the content that's in your application so that when they search using Google Search, instead of just finding stuff that's on the web in websites, they're also finding stuff that's on their phone in your application. So now, if they're interested in something, if they're interested in a particular type of content, they've probably installed your app, right? Because they wouldn't have installed it if they weren't interested in it to begin with. So now they've installed your app, and your app, if it is one of those that's only ever used once, at some point after they've used it, if they're searching online in Google Search for content, wouldn't it be great if they could get into your application and launch your application directly? Well, that's the goal of app indexing. That's what it does. But it goes a little bit further than that. Then, if people are using your application and they're using specific content in your application, or they're accessing specific screens in your application, surely it's logical that by the fact that they're doing this, that you want to record that they are more interested in this type of thing, so then for future searches for that type of content, they're going to be taken into your app as well. So it affects the signals of their app that go to Google, of your app, sorry, that go to Google. So as your users are searching, usage of your app makes it even more likely that they'll find your content. So this is a little abstract. Let's look at an example. So here's an example of an application that has recipes in it. So I like food, I like to cook, I'm a really bad cook, but I have several applications on my phone for recipes, and I sometimes like to take a look at, okay, if I'm going to cook something tonight, or if I want to learn something new, what do I usually do? I go to the Google search app, and I start searching, you know, what is a recipe for this? How would I cook this? What are the instructions? And in this scenario here, you can see I've typed in pan-fried halloumi and honey tomato, and look at the results that I got. The top result here was an app and not a website. You can tell from the little icon beside it that this is the app and this is the app icon. Now this may be an app that I installed once to read a particular recipe, and I read that recipe and then I forgot all about the app. And like, that could be your app, that could be you. You've done all this work to build this, you've gotten me to install it, I used it once, and then I forgot about it. But now I'm coming in and I'm searching, and because I'm searching for content that's available within that app, and this app has had its content indexed using app indexing, now I'm actually able to find that and launch directly into the app. I think that's really cool. But it goes a little further. The next one is autocomplete. So we're all used to using autocomplete in search. So if we start typing for something, then Google will give us a number of suggestions based on autocomplete. And this can also happen for content that's in your application. So in this case, I've had this app installed. This recipe is one of the recipes that's available to this app. And I started searching for something where I just started saying, I'm interested in something that's pan-fried, and then I got a number of autocomplete suggestions, including one that's within this application. Now in this scenario, I'm going to see this and I'm going to remember, oh, I remember that app. I installed that a while ago. I had some good stuff in that, and I'm going to relaunch it. And what makes this even more interesting, and it's a little bit of fun for me, is that if you take a look carefully, I typed pan-fried with a space in the middle, but the recipe is pan-fried with a hyphen in the middle. But Google was smart enough to see that, to use that in autocomplete and to give that to me as one of the options. So again, this content was in the app, and then when I'm searching, not in the app, I've forgotten about the app, I'm just using the Google search box on my phone, it's able to direct me back into this app. And then finally, if people are trying to search for applications such as yours, so say you've built a recipe application and somebody is searching for recipe applications, not in the store, but on Google, what can happen is if you've used app indexing in your app and you've tagged your app as a recipe app connected with a recipe site, which I'll show in a moment, then Google will say, this might be an app that you're interested in. So as I'm searching for apps for recipes or something along those lines, then the app can show up in the search results along with a handy install button. So users searching for your app can find it not only in the Play Store, but can also find it while they're actually searching on Google for content. They might find the app as well, giving them access to your app so that they can install it. So, it sounds magical, but how does it all work? So the first thing, and the most common scenario, is that you probably have a site already, and that site has content on it, and as well as this site having content on it, your mobile app has content on it too. Google's going to be crawling your site for content, so what you want to do is associate the content that's on your site with your application, so that when you're searching for that type of content, if that application's already installed, then the search results will be able to point at the application instead. So if you have these two, if you have the site and you have the app, you've got almost everything that you need. All you got to do is associate the two of them with each other. Now the easiest way to do this for Android is there's a file called assetlinks.json that you would store on your web server in a specific directory. And all this file does is it defines the relationship between your site and your app. It looks something like this. So here is the JSON file, the asset links JSON file. And all it is that at the top, you can see there's a tag called relation. And that relation tag contains content that says handle all URLs. So that's telling the Google search engine that if an app is installed, handle all URLs in the app instead of on the site. And how do I specify the app? That's with the target tag that you can see here. And the target tag just specifies what my app is. And the important thing that you would see here is the package name. And when you build an app, when you build an Android app, you give it a package name, like the one that I've been building that I use for this demo is just com.appindexingsample.app. And I specify that as my target, and then I put the SHA-256 fingerprint in there, and I upload that to my web server. And that's it. That's all I need to do. So now as the Google bot is crawling my website, and it reads this, and it reads assetlinks.json, it will know that this application, the com.appindexingsample.app in the Play Store, is associated with that site. So if a user in future has my app installed, does a search, gets a set of results, then the search results, instead of painting links to the site, will paint links to my app so that I can launch my app directly. A great way so that my app doesn't get forgotten, my app doesn't get lost amongst all of the users' apps, and if it's only ever been used once or twice, it's a great way to relaunch it. Now, this isn't just for Android. I'm just using Android as an example. If you're an iOS developer, there is an Apple App Site Association file as well that you would have to put on your site, and you put the same kind of data in that one. So now I've associated the content in my site with my app. And let me give another example other than recipes. Say I've got a site for funny cats. And in my site for funny cats, I have pictures of cats, and I have videos of cats, and I have stories about cats. Now in my mobile application, instead of having hundreds and hundreds of different screens, I have one screen that renders pictures of cats and uses parameters to drive which picture. I have one screen that has videos of cats and uses parameters to drive which video. And I have one screen for stories about cats and uses parameters to drive which story. So how in my app do I say, okay, when this kind of content is looked for on the web, launch it in my application and launch it to that specific screen? Well, for that you use something called a URL scheme, so that you just create a mapping that says URLs that define a video are launched by one activity. If you're an Android developer, an activity is just what drives the screen. URLs for another type of URL, like for example my pictures, would be launched by one activity, and then URLs that define stories would be launched by one activity. And then, when I now search for content, and I'm using the Google Search app, and I search for content, and the Google crawler finds content, say for example I'm looking for a funny video that I heard about of a cat eating a cupcake, and I search and I'm finding results in my search that match the URL of the cat eating the cupcake, which match the URL in my application for the activity that plays videos. This link is going to happen so that then I can launch not only my app, but go directly to the activity and play the video in that activity. As a result, it just makes it a very, very simple methodology for me as a developer to be able to drive people to the right activities in my app based on the content that they search for on the web. So this is all very well, and this is great, and this is a lovely way for me to re-engage, but how do I go even deeper? And here's where we use the app indexing SDK that I've mentioned. Now, the SDK allows me as a programmer to submit activity that users are doing in my app to the Google search engine. Now, the nice thing about this is that this can then impact search results on the device. And the API for this is very simple. When a user starts an activity, I send a message saying that they've started. And when the user's finished an activity, I send a message saying that they've stopped. It's really as easy as that. But the data that becomes collected then becomes extremely valuable to you as the application developer, because then you could see, for example, that for a particular user that watches a lot of funny videos about cats, if you've been sending signals to Google from this user that they like funny videos about cats, then in the future when that user is searching for funny videos about cats, they're even more likely to be taken into your application to see these videos, to see these funny videos about cats. This is all a very simple API call that you make. So there's three things. Number one, on your site, if you specify the relationship with the app. And number two, on your app, if you specify the relationship with the site and the activities in your app to launch in response to particular types of content, you can say you're done. You've made that connection, you've made that link, and you're good to go. But then number three, taking a little bit further, using these APIs to tell Google about usage of your app will then, for that user, create almost like this customized experience on their phone that helps change the signaling and helps change the ranking of how your app will appear based on them using it. So the more they use it, the more likely they are to find it. The more likely they are to find it, the more likely they are to use it. And you can set up this virtuous cycle of people rediscovering your app, so it's not going to be one of those apps that's used once and then lost forever. And here's an example of, think about if there are, like in my case that I've been using as a recipe app, if I've got multiple recipe apps on my phone, and don't you want the one that you've built to be the one that I use most? And using this kind of technology will help you push your app up the stack in the same way as I've shown here. But enough of me talking about it. Let's take a look at some examples and take a look at some people that have used it and seen the experience that they had. The first of these is the Daily Mail, which is a newspaper in the United Kingdom. Now, the Daily Mail newspaper saw all of these results that I find really funny because there's a lot of twos in here. So the first thing was that, they're really interested in impressions. They're really interested in how many people start reading an article. And they saw that once they started using app indexing, so compared before and after they started using app indexing, they saw a 22.2% boost in impressions. Almost immediately, more people started reading articles. Not only that, they spent 20% more time per visit. Now, what I would deduce from this is that they were finding things that they were more interested in. You're going to spend more time reading something if you're interested in it, rather than being drawn to something that you're not interested in. So when you're searching for some content, and you find this kind of content, and you're being driven back into this application with which to read the content, this is what the Daily Mail were experiencing, 20% more times per visit. Now, music to a lot of app developers' ears is that when people will share apps with each other, when people will tell their friends about your application, which gives you free marketing. Well, the Daily Mail, they found that they doubled the amount of times that somebody shared an article when this article was found using app indexing, after they incorporated app indexing into their app, which was like this whole new channel where people were sharing the application and giving the Daily Mail free marketing as a result. And then the last one, and it's similar to the second statistic, but it was they found that when an article was discovered via search, as opposed to you finding the article by using the application, that they were twice as likely to spend time in that article as when they just found it at random. Excuse me. So we can see that they were having all of these great benefits just by incorporating app indexing. Now think about the amount of research that you might have to do, and the amount of marketing that you have to do, and the amount of advertising that you'd have to do, and promotions to be able to get these kind of numbers. Well, the Daily Mail in this case found they got these kind of numbers simply by incorporating app indexing, and therefore the workflow that people have on their phone, the things that they do using Google search, for example, was driving all this great richness into the application for them. Another example is Tabelog, which is in Japan, and it's a site for restaurants and restaurants reviews. And users, whenever you want to go to a new restaurant, you'll take a look and you'll see pictures and what people have said about that restaurant. Now, when they incorporated app indexing into their app, they found that page views of restaurants went up almost 10%, almost immediately. So as a result, app indexing was driving more people to see the restaurant pages in their app, as opposed to seeing them on other places in the web. Not only that, impressions, so actual page impressions went up a huge 63%. So this started becoming the go-to place for people to find details about restaurants by searching on Google. Just simply 63% increase, and all they did was incorporate app indexing. Actual clicks, so while they're in a restaurant page and they're doing something in that restaurant page, maybe submitting a review themselves, maybe sharing it, that saw an increase as well, in this case 2.6%. And then the click-through rate on autocomplete, remember the autocomplete slide that I showed earlier on? They saw that autocomplete drove a 10% click-through rate. So that somebody started typing the name of a restaurant, and then that name of a restaurant got auto-completed for them, and then they selected it and were taken into Tabelog instead of taken somewhere else. They already saw 10% of their click-through rate came from those auto-completions. Some great, great numbers here, all because they incorporated app indexing. So that's it, and that's the idea behind app indexing. It's my recommendation to you that if you want to drive people to your app, to think about driving people to your app through content as opposed to, or as well as other things. There's a universe of content available to your users on their devices. Now, this universe of content isn't just on the web, it's also in your app. And if you get your app into the index, you can start receiving some of the figures similar to what the Daily Mail and Tabelog received, because users in their workflow, in their daily workflow, will be searching through that universe of content and hopefully finding your content too. So thank you very much. Kamsahamnida.